Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to Fishing for Men, a podcast for men who are interested in learning how to drop their nets and walk with Jesus. We're just a group of normal guys talking about our own walks in faith and hoping you might find something you can relate to as well. Everything you hear when you tune in will be grounded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, 19 through 20, which reads, "And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men.' Immediately they left their nets and followed him." So today we're going to be continuing our identity series. We really started off with our identity in Christ, and that's where we want to anchor everything back to, because that's the thing that is most important. And so go back and listen to that episode if you have not had a chance to take a listen. But for today, like I said, we're going to be talking about our identity in work and how so many men find their identity in what they do for a living. And so before we get started, I want to introduce all the guys in the room. I'm Billy Bernhardt, and I'll be the host for today. Cole.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Mike.
Hey.
And Cody.
Hello.
So to get us kicked off, one of the things that I want to just read an excerpt from is John Mark Comer's book, The Garden City. And I think this is really a quick, interesting passage. And he says, to remember all the word ministry means is serving. We're all serving. We're all in ministry. Some of us, like myself, he's talking about himself, are in serving inside the church, which is great, but a vast majority of the people that are attending the church are serving outside of the church as a paramedic or a landscape architect or designer for Google or a hunting guide or a surf instructor or radiologist or a parking attendant. But it doesn't mean you're serving outside of the kingdom. And it definitely doesn't mean what you do isn't spiritual and that it doesn't matter to God. And so his point is that no matter where you are or what you do, you are still serving the kingdom just through your occupation. And so one of the most polarizing aspects of our identity as men can be related to or connected to what we do for a living. I think it consumes us a lot. If you kind of take a look at how many hours in the day you spend there, if you're at a minimum, you're working 8 hours a day, that's a long time to be working. And so it can be easy for us to over prioritize or underappreciate the work that we do. But Scripture is pretty clear on the role work should have in our lives. We're his partners, and so he's given us skills and abilities to go into these specific areas of work, to be able to serve him, to be able to proclaim his glory and honor through our work. And I think it's pretty obvious that we were created to work, but we aren't our work.
That's interesting you should mention that, because if you think about, you said 8 hours at work. Everybody has 24 hours a day. If you sleep 8 hours a day, that leaves 16 hours. And out of that 16 hours you're awake, you are at work. So that's 50% of the time that we are at work, that we're in that environment. So it kind of eats up, your mentality that, hey, this is my thing, right, at work. And yeah, I see a lot of people use career as like their I'm not call it drugs, but kind of is, because you're a workaholic and you're chasing careers more than anything as an identity. Because if you don't make it to that level, then you're nobody.
Who's putting that tag on nobody?
I think we put it on ourselves.
Put it on ourselves, and other people put it on us too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think we always look at other people, like, when you go to a party and you meet somebody, what's the first thing you do after you?
Hey, what do you do for work?
Exactly.
What do you do for a living?
Yeah.
We've almost put it on ourselves.
Especially if you see what they drive up in and what they're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about that, so I love that you brought up the hours. As I was prepping for this, actually, I like numbers. And so if you think about the number of hours, if you were to only work a 40-hour week, which many people work way more than that, that's 2,080 hours of working a year. Now, if you don't work on the weekends. Well, some people might, as they, like we talked about, there's a over prioritization of work. But if you didn't, the amount of hours you sleep is 2,920. And so there's only 8,660 hours in a year. So 24% of your life is spent working if you worked and didn't retire and do all that stuff. And then 33% is sleeping. Like that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I think many of us, and I think we've been told that you shouldn't bring your faith into the workplace. And so that's an interesting kind of concept as we think about our work, because if we don't, we're actually cutting out 24% of our life that we're not bringing God into.
Yeah, that's true.
So before we get into this, just if you're listening out there, do a little self-reflection. How do you view work in your life? Have you ever thought about how you represent Jesus in your work? Just do a quick sort of assessment there, just to understand and help you better understand the impact that your work is actually playing on your sense of identity. Like, how do you prioritize that? And so the first thing we want to get into is bloom where you're planted. And I love this analogy in talking about how do we blossom in the places that we are that we're called to work in. Like I said earlier, we are given specific skills and abilities because God knew where He was going to place us and what jobs that we may have. And so one of the scriptures that we want to read as a part of this is Galatians 6:4-5. It says, "But each one must examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone, and not in regard to another." I think that one's challenging because I think usually we look at what everybody else is doing. Hey, what does that person do for work? Or, hey, what is that person's title? Hey, they've been working less time than I have. Why am I not there? And so we start to get into that comparison game.
Let me read this in the NLT version. Yeah. It says, "Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else, for we are each responsible for our own conduct."
Yeah.
I like that it says, we don't need to compare ourselves to anyone else, and we are to pay attention to our own work, that we will get satisfaction. Because sometimes we kind of compare ourselves to somebody else's work. It's like, oh, I want to be like that person, or I want to achieve what that person achieved.
Yeah. I personally, if I stay off Facebook or I stay off LinkedIn, I feel better about my work every day. Like I feel fulfilled, I guess you could say, in the work that my current job. Because in the past 6 months, I've been up and down the roller coaster of, is this what I'm meant for? Should I try something different? But lately, if I stay off that stuff, if I focus on me and staying positive, that's so true. It's just focus on you.
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't compare to other people, but we should compare to ourselves of what we did yesterday or last week or last month, so that we can progress, right? Comparing, getting better is not bad, but I think how you get better, especially at work, if you're comparing to somebody else, like your stature or your career wise, then maybe that's not a healthy comparison. But if you're comparing yourself to, hey, last week, I didn't perform as well, but I need to do better, I think that's okay, because we're kind of doing like a self-assessment among looking inside us and not compare it with somebody else.
Yeah.
Because I think the trap is when we see somebody who is doing better and we want to be one up from them. Dude, I had this one guy when I was working in corporate America. he would one up everybody. Like he would say he has the best computer, how many graphics card, whatever, how many monitors. And when you say something, I'm like, my day kind of suck, and then he wants to one up on that too. Like no, I'm serious. He's like, oh, I've got this neighbor, it's like, I mean, he would just go on, and I was like, dude, are you serious? You are one up in everything, even like when somebody's telling you how down they are, you're going to one up on that person too?
Yeah.
It's like, that's just insane.
For sure. And I think the other thing that's interesting here is the sort of flip side of that, which is Colossians 3:17, which says, whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through him to God the Father. And so even then, we're not working for ourselves. At the end of the day, we're working for God. And sometimes I think we forget that, of like, I have a boss, I have a boss's boss, I'm working for them, but at the end of the day, you do, but you don't, I guess, is kind of the way that you think about it, and how you represent yourself has a huge impact on how you work for your boss or how you don't work for your boss.
Don't forget about the people that you serve too, your staff, team.
For sure.
All this comparison externally really takes the focus off what it should be on, which is who you show up to serve.
Yeah. And I think that's a good question to think about, is like, who do you serve in your job?
Yeah, we always talk about who our customers are. And everybody around me is a customer. It's not just the actual customer behind the loan that I'm doing, but it's the processor, it's the loan officer, it's my boss. Mm-hmm. Everybody is a customer, and everybody deserves to be treated with the utmost respect in the transaction.
Because at the end of the day, we talk about this, I'm in sales, and so nobody's ever going to remember the big deal that you did.
Right.
But they will remember how you treated them.
Oh, for sure.
And the impact that you had on them. And so as we continue through here, like, I know Cole hit on this a little bit, of how he keeps himself from comparing careers of success from everybody that's around us, but love to kind of just get some more thoughts on how do we keep ourselves from not getting into the comparison game. And before I let you guys answer, I thought this, there is a really interesting quote on comparison from Mark Twain, and it says, comparison is the death of joy.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's so true.
Like, as soon as you get into that, comparison doesn't lead to anything good ever.
No, unless it would drive you to somehow not compare, or better yourself so you're not comparing. But I think you just continue down. You'd spiral.
Well, I think there's always somebody else that's going to be better than you in whatever. Right? I mean, even if you go buy something, like, we had, I'm in real estate business, so a client buys a house, and then they're like, I wonder if there's something else better out there. Oh yeah, there's always something better. I mean, like the timing of it, but it's the same thing when we compare ourselves. You're always going to meet somebody that's going to be better than you. So are we not to compare?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because, and this was going to be my biggest question for y'all on this topic, when I thought about it overall, is how am I looked upon if I'm not letting my work control me, I guess? How am I looked upon that I'm not the guy that's always pushing and pushing and pushing for the next promotion, or the next biggest thing, I guess? So I try to stay away from the comparison thing, but I do catch myself comparing still. Mm-hmm. I'm a sinner for that, in that aspect, for sure. But how am I looked upon if I'm just okay with the status quo, essentially?
Well, I think...
Is that okay?
People think you're apathetic or
lazy.
Or lazy. I mean, it can be interpreted as that.
Yeah.
I think we've told our client, like, when they're looking at houses and they're like, oh, I don't know if this is the one, even though we've seen it, kind of bring everything to the table for them. but I always tell them, like, hey, you have to assess for this season of your life. So, how do we not compare ourselves or our career? I think it's like we look at where we are today as the boundaries and say that, hey, am I performing at my work?
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because I always, when I reflect on my career, I always go back to, I am putting way more effort into my marriage and my kids right now to even really honestly care about getting the next promotion or getting the next bonus at my job, because right now are some very pivotal times in my kids' lives and in my marriage. So that's a good point. It's where I'm at in season of life. It may come a time where it opens up for career advancement.
Sure.
When the kids are grown and gone, and you have a lot more time.
Sure. Then I want to retire and be in the mountains forever.
I think it's you've got to really be careful of what the motivation is for the promotion or the advancement. Is it money? Is it self-promotion, or is there a heart issue there of like why you need that? I think you have to do some interesting reflection in those.
Why are you not content with what God's given you?
Yeah, because He gives enough. Is it because I need more things? Like maybe. Why do you need more things?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you mentioned something like being apathetic. A question that popped up I think it was in the book that I'm reading right now, Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard. He says he asked the question of, how would Jesus do your job?
Ooh.
He wouldn't be apathetic. Mm-hmm. He would do it to the best of his ability.
Yeah.
Now, would he boast about everything? I don't think so. But he would do it and do it well. So back to the Colossians verse, which was, I'm working for God.
Yeah.
And so if you anchor back on that, I think it helps keep you motivated. I know it does for me, of like those days that I don't feel motivated or something like that. It's like, okay, well, I'm here to represent God. Like, as if I had like Team Jesus jersey on, like people know I'm a Christian at work. If I'm not doing my best, does that reflect poorly?
You're Christ's ambassador, right?
Yep.
So when you're an ambassador, you represent, that brand, that name. Are you living up to that name?
Yeah. Because if you're just working to work, it says in Ecclesiastes that your labor is futile.
Yeah.
Because guess what? You work your whole life just to give it off to somebody who didn't work for it.
And at the end of the day,
you don't take it.
You don't take you don't take it with you as one, but think about your job, right? Even if you quit, even if you're not there, nobody's going to miss you.
They'll replace that.
Yeah, we are all replaceable.
Yeah.
So don't compare yourselves. So, as a next sort of key point that we kind of want to touch on today is everything we do is spiritual. And that's kind of a weird thing to think about. At least it was for me when I think about work.
I've got the first verse pulled up here. Ecclesiastes 3:22. So I saw that there's nothing better for people than to be happy in their work. That is our lot in life, and no one can bring us back to what happens after we die.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going back to what we just said.
Yeah, and then the 1 Corinthians 10:31 is very similar to the Colossians one. It says, whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. So the question is, what would it take for us to view our careers as spiritual and a part of God's? That was an interesting way to say that. I think I said it like GAWD. Of God's plan for our lives.
How do you view your career as a spiritual part? I mean, like, I think about, when you had to deal with hard colleagues or client, I mean, dude, my spiritual, I'll be like, God, can you hang on to this for me while I go and attend to this client real quick, and then I'll come back to my spiritual life. Because, I mean, it's hard, right? You have to be the same person. Like, if you are empathetic, if you are compassionate, if you are loving, then you treat your client how you are. But if your spiritual level isn't mature, then you're going to not represent God very well. And, you know, I brought that up because many years ago when Facebook, you know, everybody started advertising their business on Facebook, you know, we always go to like this class about, how to set up business or how to do marketing and stuff. And they always say, you need to have your business page and your personal page on Facebook so that, you know, it's different. But then it's like, why are you different?
Shouldn't be different.
Why are you two different people?
Exactly. And then actually, if you look at it, it is true, because some people that have those mentality, you look at their business Facebook page and they're like, you know, all nice and lovey-dovey and very professional. But man, when you go to their personal page, oh man, it's just like, wow, do I really know this person? I think it's the same as, you know, if you're walking with God, hopefully you're walking in the same way as you're walking with God and you're walking with people around you.
Yeah. Yeah, I like kind of one of the ways that Jesus puts it when he's talking to some of his disciples in Matthew. He says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And the way I've kind of thought about that from a work perspective is I work at Microsoft. It's not exactly the most Christian-friendly company. And so I kind of take that into work of, hey, there's a harvest here of people.
You're in a battle.
And there's their workers are few.
That's true.
And so how do I, without being in your face and like shoving it down people's throats, because that doesn't do anybody any good either, but like, how do I conduct my business in a way that is different, that people kind of go, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And sort of just a personal story on this. So 2.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, was really when I was getting deep and wanting to like truly become a disciple to Jesus. And I felt like I couldn't do that at Microsoft. To the point where I'm like, I can't do this. I need to go find somewhere else. And I actually tried. I tried to get out of Microsoft. I tried to go leave. I submitted my application places. Didn't get one reply back to anything. And about 2 weeks later after that, maybe a month, I met this guy who was on the new team that I was becoming a part of. And he was leading a Christian group at Microsoft. And it was like this door opened of like, oh, you can do that? That's available? What? And it completely changed how I approached work after that, because it was back to the workers are few and the harvest is plentiful. Like this is the place of ministry, and it changed my mindset into back to the passage or the excerpt that we read at the beginning, that our ministry is wherever we're working. It's wherever we're serving. And so if you ask me what I do for a living, yes, I'm a sales manager, but at the end of the day, Microsoft is my ministry. And our group is called the Marketplace Ministry for Microsoft. And so it has completely changed my outlook. Like you'll find on my LinkedIn, it says, first and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. It drives all my decisions for my family and for work. It's on my Teams chat tagline. It's a Bible verse that's there. It's little subtle ways that you can spread the gospel at work. And what's really interesting about it is it has driven so many questions that have come to me of like, hey, I saw that. Not just for people who are non-believers, but as an encouragement to people who are believers that didn't understand that they can actually do that at work.
Yeah.
Like I'll get calls from people like, hey, I saw your tagline when we were chatting on Teams. How do you be a Christian at Microsoft? It's like, I'm a believer too, but how do you do that? I'm like,
just don't yell at people.
You start doing it.
Yeah.
And I've had that conversation with a few other people. And so I've heard some people do different things, like put like prayer cards on their desk. That's the one with the office all the time. Like if you are in the office all the time, that's helpful. If you're not, I don't think it's going to do a ton of good. But like, what are those things that you can do, and do people? I guess the other question is, do the people you work with actually know that you're a Christian?
Yeah. I think it's
and do your actions back that up?
Exactly. I think that's what I was going to say is, it's how you treat people. Like you said earlier, at the end of the day, we can't take any of this with us, but people don't remember the sales that you did or, whatever closing that you did, but they will remember how you treat them. And I think, like you're right, where you are, harvest is plentiful, but the most important thing is, does people know who you are?
Yeah.
And how do they know is they look at you and look at your actions.
What's been really cool about it is so everybody at work knows I'm a Christian. I've been pretty open about that. But what's become of that, even the people who aren't Christians, they've met other people who are Christians at work, and they actually connect us. He's like, "Oh, did you know he was he's funny." They'll say he's religious is usually the term they use. I'm like, "Oh, okay, like introduce us." So I've actually met. This happened at our leadership summit in the beginning of the year. I got connected with like 2 or 3 people that I had never met before, who were believers, and I was like, interesting. And so it's kind of a cool way that kind of God works through the ability to do that. So
like when we're at work, when we're with client, we always wear our polo shirt with our logo on it that has a 316. Because our company is 316 Team Realty, and a lot of times people would ask, like, "Hey, what's that 316? Did y'all like started March 16?" And people who don't know, right, they will ask that, and I always kind of caveat that was, "Oh yeah, I'm glad you asked, because now you get 2 different verses." And some people that who are a follower, they're always thinking of John 3:16, but I always tell them, well, you get to learn another one. It's actually 1 John 3:16. If you read that, paraphrasing, it's like, now that we know what Christ done for us, we need to do for one another. Right, because in business, it's not always about money, and sometimes I have to remind myself, like, hey, that I'm working for the Lord, like Colossians says, that I'm working for the Lord. That the money comes later, so whatever my client needs, that's what I'm going to put first. And with that in mind, it helps me to align myself. When you ask about how can we be spiritual, right? That is a reminder for me to, like, hey, I need to walk in the truth with God and with my clients, whoever I'm serving.
Yep.
And that's really how, as much as sometimes I don't like, how my client acts and stuff, I have to align myself with God and says, no, I can't step out of that path because it's not who God called me to be.
Yep. I agree. So with that, let's go ahead and kind of just jump into the last point that we want to land for tonight, which is, work comes third or maybe lower. And so what are the priorities in your life? I think Cole kind of mentioned, right now his marriage and his kids are top of the list. And so where do we prioritize work? And Ecclesiastes 4:6, I think really kind of sums it up here, which is awesome, which is, 1 handful of rest is better than 2 fistful of labor and striving after the wind. And then the other passage that we wanted to kind of just mention here was Matthew 6:25-34, which is really where Jesus is talking about, man, don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. That's what the world worries about all the time, of like, what am I going to wear today? What am I going to eat today? Like, hey, God tells you he's going to provide for your daily needs that you have. And so the question we have here is, what steps do you need to take to keep work in its proper place in our lives?
I think it's the reflecting on what you have. And I don't mean like the materialistic, but the kids, the family, just the surrounding, friends. What's more important? Is it chasing after that title, climbing that corporate ladder, the status, or the things like Cole was talking about, kids, wife, marriage? Is that more important?
Or is it the other minor steps that make up the big picture, like removing certain things from your life that make you want to compare yourself to other people, Or is it doing a prayer before you start work for the day, and doing a prayer after lunch break, saying a prayer after work, that kind of stuff. That's honestly something that I need to do more of, is that prayer before, during work. I actually do a pretty good job of staying positive and motivational during work with people around me. But I personally can bottle things up sometimes and get frustrated and then have to walk away from my desk and then step back into it. So
yeah, for sure.
It's that minor stuff too that helps me keep it in a proper place in my life.
Yeah, I think it's reminding ourselves that our success in our job is not the end goal.
Yeah.
Again, like it says in Ecclesiastes, your labor is futile if you're just working to work. And so
what's the point? What's the point of having a lot of money and then you're not well?
Yeah.
Also, don't pick up your phone at 5:01 and check your email after you clocked out at 5. Check your work email.
Oh, that's hard.
That's so hard to do.
Especially in my.
I was gonna say, for you as a realtor, like that's how do you put boundaries on that? Because you don't have sort of like a time box of like, I only work 8 to 5 these days.
Well, not only realty, anybody that's business for self.
Yeah.
That's like got to be so hard.
Self-employed.
Self-employed people, it's got to be very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, our client knows, and sometimes we will tell them that, hey, if I don't call you back right now, I'll call you back later. But when we're negotiating contract, we have talked to clients at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night because that's the only time they have. Then, you know what, we put the kids down and, okay, we do work, but after that, that's it.
Yeah.
But we don't do it all the time.
Sure.
It's God first, family, and then work. And it's hard. It's like I was going to ask Cody because, he used to work for a place that sells great chicken but don't open on Sundays. It's how did you guys prioritize your work, know that you're in that environment?
I don't have a really great answer other than just our staff was, we really turned it over. I mean, we delegated, we selected well, we trained well.
Because you're supposed to be there. I mean, as a owner operator, you're supposed to be there too. It's not like you go and say, hey, I don't have to go to work today, but you have to go to work.
Yeah.
Right. But how do you make it that it's not the first thing in your life?
I mean, all of that, I guess, is, I don't know for me if that's a great example because it's just really systems and delegation freed us up. We did that kind of. I'm more back to where Cole was saying it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing. I think it's everything, starting the day with God.
I think that's a big one.
If I start the day just out of the bed, into text, email, and out the door, whatever, totally different day than if I start the day early in the morning, quiet, low light, Bible, prayer.
Yeah.
It's a completely different perspective on the day you enter into.
So you got to set your mind.
Yeah.
Do you feel like does your body feel different whenever you do one versus the other?
Even subconsciously.
I've noticed that mine does. It's like the days that I, maybe I hit snooze too many times. I'm sleeping in. I'm immediately in a rush, and I can feel this hurried nature in my body of like, I got to do all these things, and then it's very hard to get out of that, especially if I'm back to back to back on meetings all day. Like there's no break time to reset my body into a calm mode. It's just I'm constantly behind all day rather than me dictating how I start my day, which is quiet, slow, at a pace, spending time with God. I can immediately feel a different feeling inside my body.
Yeah. It's funny you guys mentioned that. It kind of brings up that whole tithing thing, right? I mean, when we hear about tithing, we think about money.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about like giving God's best first,
your first 10%,
10%, forget about the 10%, right?
Yeah.
I know tithing is 10.
Give your best first,
but the whole concept is that you give God first. So like Cody was talking about, and you get up in the morning, you give God your time first. It just kind of aligns yourself for the rest of the day. And I do agree. I used to get up at 5 and just read, 5, 10, 20 minutes, whatever. And the day does go by better. I mean, it frames your mind, though.
Yeah.
It's like athletes getting in that zone. Like, okay, I'm about to swim, I'm about to run, whatever, and just get that mind frame right.
It's like a warm up for your body and soul.
Oh, I think it's also an opportunity to surrender the day to Him.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not that I'm dictating the day and what I do. It's, hey, God, this time is yours. I'm going to surrender this day because it's yours. Thank you for another one.
Yep.
How would you like for me to represent you today? Show me where I should go, who I should talk to, and work through me throughout the day.
So what do you recommend for a guy whose alarm goes off at 4:20 to work out and at 5?
I don't know.
You
You're crazy.
Spiritual time for you though too, right?
working out is
Working
my
out.
spiritual time for
Yeah.
sure. But when I'm hitting that snooze button, like you said, I get that angst to get up.
Like you're immediately behind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I get my workout, it's like my heart rate is starting to increase and I'm maxing out my heart rate during the workout. But it is, like you said, it's
Calms you down.
calms me down too.
Yeah.
I think
So-
for me in the days that I
Well, it's
do
worship
that,
too for you.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's worship for him.
Yeah.
is there an opportunity in your day to sacrifice time to get back to God? So is it lunch?
Right.
Is there 20 minutes in lunch to give Him, like, hey, I hit snooze a bunch of times. I decided to take sleep over spending time with you. Hey, I'm going to now spend my quiet time to reset my body maybe halfway through the day or whatever it is. I have 2 reminders on my phone, one at 10 and 3, so mid-afternoon and mid-morning. Just as I call it a recenter time in prayer. It's just a quick 10 seconds to put everything out, unless I'm like on a 10 to 10:30 meeting. It's kind of hard to like, hey guys, I'm going to go away for it.
I'm gonna mute everybody real quick.
So I'll work it around there, but I'll literally put my phone down, step away or something, and I repeat Psalm 116:7, which is, Lord, bring my soul to rest again because you have always been good to me. And so it's a way to recenter myself, and I stole that from Robert Jordan. He sent the email out a few weeks ago. I'm like, I am totally stealing that bad boy. He's one of our campus pastors at Hope Fellowship. So shout out to him if he ever listens to this episode. Thank you for that. It's actually helped me tremendously in my days just to recenter. So it's it's a good thing. Like I said, it's the small things that you can sprinkle in throughout the day to refocus and make sure that work is kind of in its proper place. Because I think, for the guys out there that maybe have never thought of work this way, I think thing that I want them to hear is that your worth is not determined by your production.
Yeah.
And in the field that I'm in sales, it's very easy to fall that way. And so I think for anybody, it's not about the widgets that you make or sell or whatever. Your worth is not found there. How we started it. Your worth is what God says you are, and He called you very good. And so I think that for those guys out there that haven't thought about it that way, I just want you to hear that. And then the last thing is for all the work that we do and the rhythm of work that we have, we must also have a rhythm of rest. I think that's one of the biggest ways that we combat the busyness of work is rest. Yeah. It's time to celebrate. Maybe you've done some awesome things in the week. That's awesome. Celebrate those. Praise God for the abilities and opportunities to do that. But then also, we've talked about it, tithing a couple of times, is use the money that you've received from your job to give back to others. And I think that, again, that's a great way to sort of combat the overworking or misprioritization of work in our lives. So
you mentioned about rest. I agree that you should rest and rejoice and celebrate and stuff, but don't just do it when you have a big win.
No, do it on the bad weeks too.
Yeah, bad weeks too. Like even half, during a week, during a day, half a day, like you say, you're 10 and 3. I think that's all very important, that we get to rest in the midst of all the craziness. Kind of almost like you have to recharge.
Yep, absolutely.
Get back in the battlefield.
So for all the guys out there listening, take some time. Consider where God might be calling you to reflect on how your work is playing into your sense of identity. Is it a high priority within your identity? Just kind of think about that. Surrender that to God and allow Him to kind of work through that and help Him to give you discernment and wisdom on where your work actually is sort of in your priorities of life. And so, is work part of your identity? Is it all of your identity? Are you joyfully employed, or are you struggling to find the spirituality? And so just do some self-reflection. I think we've been pretty consistent. We want this to be something that is a call to action for everybody that does listen. And so the last thing I want to end with another excerpt from a book, because we kind of started that way. This one's from Divine Conspiracy. It says, "One who does not know this way of job discipleship by experience cannot begin to imagine what release and help and joy there is to special religious times. The majority of our waking hours will be isolated from the manifest presence of the kingdom in our lives. Those waking hours will be times when we are on our own, on our job. Our time at work, even religious work, so those who may work at the church, or turn out to be on a holiday from God." So basically he's saying if you're not bringing God into your work, you're basically taking a holiday from God. And like we talked about at the beginning, it's going to be 25 or 24% of our life. So with that, we'll end this one, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Well, y'all, thanks for joining us on Fishing for Men. We know you could be spending your time doing anything else, yet you chose to spend it listening to us, and we are so thankful for that. We hope you found something valuable from this episode. If there are other topics you want us to discuss, we would love for you to reach out to us on Instagram at Fishing for Men Podcasts, or email us at fishingformenpodcasts@outlook.com. We pray that you come alongside us in the journey of discipleship to Jesus. So stay tuned for more episodes. The stories are still being written.